Well, hi everybody, and welcome to our class today on basic research skills. We are so glad that you could join us. So just for a little bit of context, we are now on the fourth of our 5 classes in the Basic Family Search series. If you missed any of these previous classes, I noticed that my cousin Gordon, bless his heart, has put the link to the archive in the chat. So please feel free to click that link if you'd like to access recordings of any of these previous classes. Then next week is the class that I'm super excited about. It's one of my favorites. I know I say that about a lot of them. There's very few classes that I don't super enjoy teaching, but number 5 next week is one of my absolute favorite ones because it's such an important topic for members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints who want to provide temple ordinances for their ancestors. So we invite you to join us for that next week and tell your friends and family and ward members if you think they would be interested. After we finish the basic series, we will have 2 supplemental classes. We call them Boost Your Family History Brain Power, and you can see the topics there on your screen. The first one is just common mistakes that we all make, not just beginners, but everybody really, and how to avoid them. And then also the second class will focus on probably one of the trickiest mistakes that we have to deal with in family history, and that is confusing 2 people who have the same name, like Diego Martinez or Katie O'Leary, but they're not really the same person. You know, they might be relatives, but they're definitely different people. How do you tell them apart when all you've got to go on is historical records? So that class will go into detail on that, and we invite you all to join us for that. As always, we invite you also today to watch for key takeaways from class. In other words, listen and write down things, listen to what the Spirit will teach you. Watch for things that you think will help you in your family history work or that will allow you to help others. And then at the end of the class, we'll invite you to put those in the chat because you might get an insight or an inspiration that someone else didn't get. And it doesn't have to be anything the teacher said. It could be just any impression that comes to you during the class that is related to family history that you think would help yourself and other students going forward. So we'll invite you again to share those at the end of class. As far as today, here's what we've got on the schedule. First of all, I am so glad that all of you are here because research really does have a bad reputation a lot of times, especially in family history. So we'll talk a little bit about why that's the case because I think understanding why is a good first step to changing our attitude towards research or helping other people. If you might have a great view of research, but you might know some people that it intimidates or they just don't like it or whatever. So hopefully that will help in that regard. Then we will talk about the research cycle followed by a demo of the research cycle in action. And then we'll wrap up with ways to save your sanity by using a research log. So let's go ahead and dive in. How on earth did research get a bad reputation? Too many people think about research in the way that this guy obviously does by the expression on his face. Well, you might be saying, yeah, that's me, or no, not really, or I know somebody that feels this way. The big question is, why do people feel this way? And more importantly, why does it matter? Who cares if somebody hates research? Why is that a problem? Well, let's dive into that. So first of all, why is there sometimes a negative reaction to research? Well, some of us have had bad past experiences with it and not just in family history. Did any of you get a paper back in high school, a research paper marked with red ink all over the place, and you said, I can't do research, I'm a failure, and sometimes those feelings carry over. Another thing is sometimes we hear other people complain about research. It's just like when I was a kid, I started going to school and I've always loved learning. And when I was in kindergarten and first grade, I was excited to go to school until my peers started complaining about it. And then I thought, oh, maybe there's something wrong with me that I like school. I think I'm supposed to hate it. So I better not like going to school. I better complain with the rest of my friends. Well, sometimes that happens with research too. We hear people complain about it and we kind of adopt that attitude. Another roadblock is that we just simply don't know how. And another thing is we don't realize the benefits to it. So it's easy to feel negative about something if we really don't see the good aspects of it. Also, unfortunately, there's some myths going around these days in the family history community that research is no longer necessary. That's absolutely not true. In order to do accurate family history, somebody has to do the research, whether it's the person who added it to family tree or whatever. But the bottom line is it's not true to say it's no longer necessary. If you do research and I find your research online, then yeah, I didn't have to do it, but you did. So somebody needs to do the research. It's not true to say that it's not necessary anymore. The last point I wanted to bring up as far as a negative reaction is that people don't understand sometimes what research really is. So they react negatively to a false idea of research. Well, to answer the question that we raised a few slides ago, okay, so some people have a negative response to research. What's the big deal? Why don't we just leave them in peace? Let them not like research. Well, in family history, it actually does have a couple of negative consequences. For some people, disliking research leads them to avoid family history because they think it's necessary and they say, I can't do it, and therefore they conclude, I can't do family history, which is an unfortunate and incorrect conclusion. The other major negative consequence of having a bad attitude about research is that people will do family history, but in doing it, they will avoid research. Well, there's two negative consequences to that. One is that if we want to do family history without research, we will often rely on assumptions instead of facts. And we all know what happens when we rely on assumptions in any area of life, right? I've been tripped up by my false assumptions more times than I care to admit in all, not just in family history, but in all areas of life. So it doesn't work so well to just rely on assumptions that may not be correct. And then also, when we rely on assumptions, it leads us to false assumptions, I should say. It leads us to make mistakes. And in a shared tree, such as Family Tree on the FamilySearch website, once false information gets entered into the tree, it actually tends to snowball because people come to the tree expecting it to be accurate. And so they build on the information, not realizing that it's incorrect. And so it can snowball across families and generations. And once somebody realizes it's wrong, it can be very, very time consuming to clean up. So those are the negative consequences of disliking research. One reason this whole problem has come about is for many years in the family history space, people maybe pushed research a little too hard. Like I remember hearing people say things like, if you enter somebody in Family Search, you have to have an exact birth date and you must have at least 3 sources. Of course, those things are not required by Family Search. Those were just people's personal opinions. But suffice it to say that maybe in the past there's been too much of an emphasis on the most difficult aspects of research. And so people found that tedious, and many people didn't get involved in family history for that reason. But then in recent years, we kind of saw the pendulum swing, and we've already alluded to this a little bit, that if it's too hard to do regular research, then the alternative must be that we don't need to do much or any research. The trouble is, this is a false dilemma. These are kind of two extremes. And what we really want to aim for as family historians is a third, better option, which is just to learn simple research steps that you can implement quickly and easily, which is what we hope to share in this class today, and then to keep building your skills. So we don't need to get trapped in this either or false dilemma of either exhaustive, tedious research or little or no research at all. I promise you that the skills needed to do reasonable family history research are simple to obtain and practice. And as you do them, as we all do them, we grow in our ability. So, what exactly is research? I guess I have to admit that as a writer, I'm a little bit of a word nerd. So, I went to the dictionary to look it up because when I was first preparing this class, I thought, what is research? I'm not sure that I could say. I'm not sure that I could describe it in a clear way. So, of course, I went to the dictionary, and there are a few different definitions, but this is one that I really like that is simple and seems to apply very well to family history. And it is simply to discover facts by investigation. As I looked up the etymology, I discovered that research comes from the RE in research comes from the Old French, which expresses intensive force, kind of searching on steroids, maybe we could say. Rejoice is another example. It's not just plain joy, it's intense joy. So research isn't just searching as, sorry, got ahead of myself there. The rest of the word search comes from chercher, which means to search. So it's not just regular plain searching, but it's intensive searching. It's searching on steroids. It's joyful searching. It's whatever you want to say, that it's searching with that little bit of extra oomph to it. So that's what research is, and that isn't horrible. Right? I mean, honestly, we all do research in our lives, whether it's trying to decide what company to apply to for a job, or if it's trying to decide where to live, or what dishwasher to buy. Or what TV show to watch. We all have experiences in our lives where we need to gather facts in order to make good decisions. So we investigate in order to gather those facts. Well, in family history, what facts are we trying to discover by investigation? Really, it boils down to just a few simple facts. They are facts that allow us to identify a person uniquely. That really is one way to say what family history is all about. We want to know if this Diego Martinez is different than the one in my family, or, how do I identify the Diego Martinez in my family? So the facts that we want to discover are vital events such as birth, marriage, and death, and relationships such as parents, spouses, siblings, and children. And that really is it's the basics of research. These are the things that we're trying to discover about the people in our family. That's not too hard, is it? I mean, there are some times and places that are more challenging than others, but to narrow it down like this and to say, hey, when I'm researching, this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for vital events and I'm looking for relationships. As a human being, I know what they are. I can do this. You can do this. So here's an example of how discovering facts can help us. On our screen today, in our Price is Right game, we have 3 different John Bescabys, number 1, number 2, and number 3. Without looking at anything else, can any of you tell me if those guys are the same people? Well, kind of a facetious question, right? Of course we can't. Just by the names. If we were only going by the names, we could say, well, yeah, there's a good chance they are, or I think they are. But once we discover the facts, that helps us know if these guys are the same. So now these are real people on my line. So now you see that the first John Besceby, born in 1826 in Nottingham, has got these parents. This guy's born in 1818 in Lincolnshire. This one's still born in Lincolnshire, but a different date, different parents. The facts enable us to identify these people uniquely so that we can be successful in doing our family history. So, where do you find the facts? Well, most time periods and places have key records that help you identify people uniquely. And we've actually gone over those in past classes, so we're not going to belabor that today. But just as an example, when I'm researching in England, especially after the 1800s, there are three key records that will give me about 90% of the information I need in my family history research. They are church records or parish registers, government records, civil registration, and census records. And I think probably most of us are familiar with what census records are, usually done by governments as well, although sometimes by churches. But these are the key records. If I know that I'm likely to find the information I need in these records, that's really half the battle. So let's talk about then why research is still valuable, especially to address the myth that's going around in some areas or by some people that research is no longer needed, because it most definitely is. Well, one reason research still is needed is that family tree is a shared tree, and we're working with other humans who make mistakes. Guess what? Including me, including you, including all of us. We're all human. We're all going to make mistakes. So when we work with other humans on any endeavor, including family history, it helps to be able to know how to find the facts, to discover the facts by investigation. So that'll help us put good quality data in family tree, in our shared tree. And the other reason research is valuable is that it is still one of the best ways and sometimes the only way to find those people that we need to add to family tree, those people who are still missing. So research really does still have a place in our family history efforts. So, that being the case, how do we make research easier? Here are a few thoughts. One is to use common sense, and we're going to give examples and discuss each of these points a little bit more. Another is to learn how to find information and help. As family history researchers, we do not, and indeed we cannot, know everything. There is just no way. There's too much to know and understand in the family history space. But we can know how to find the information that we need. So that's the key, is not knowing everything, but knowing how to find what we need. And the third point is to be systematic instead of haphazard. So let's look at each one of those. What are examples of common sense in family history? You will probably laugh at these, but you would be probably not surprised to know that these are mistakes that have been made due to maybe not applying common sense. So if you find a woman in family tree who is having children when she's 5, that's a violation of common sense, right? We know that as human beings. 5-year-olds do not have babies. Men do not get married or father children after they die. So if we see a man that has a death date in 1855 and then he's having kids in 1860, that goes against common sense. It's unlikely that a couple would have 20 children. Now, here we're getting into more of a fuzzy area because there are instances where, through a blended family or through adoption or fostering, that a couple actually does have 20 children. But common sense tells us that that's rather unlikely. Even though there are cases where it happens, most of the time that it's not going to be the case if we see somebody in family tree with that many kids. So common sense tells us that we at least want to verify this and make sure whether this is a bunch of bad merges or whether they really did have 20 kids. But another example, this is straight from my line. Every John Pringle who marries a woman named Eleanor is not the same person. Somebody thought they were. So on my Pringle line, I had about 5 John Pringles who did marry different Eleanors. They are different men, married women named Eleanor, but they were clearly different because they were born different years in different places, but they all got munged together in family tree. So common sense is just applying our basic knowledge, and we all have it. We're all gifted with common sense. We can all tell when something is illogical. And a lot of times, again, the reason that we see violations of common sense in family tree isn't because people don't have it. It's more because they didn't stop to observe and actually think about what they were adding or what they were seeing. We tend to think that technology has advanced to the degree that we don't have to use our common sense. And that is absolutely not true. If you want a funny example of where technology fell short, Google, does strawberry have 3 R's? So this was an early effort of using AI, and it's just hilarious. AI came back, somebody asked AI, and again, this is all very well documented. If you Google it, you'll find the article. They said to AI, how many R's does strawberry have? And the AI says it has 2. Well, we know it has 3, right? Strawberry. And so they actually have a copy of the argument that the person had with AI, where AI tried to claim that strawberry only had 2 R's. The bottom line is that technology is not foolproof, right? It's only as good as it has been programmed. So technology does not make common sense unnecessary. Technology is a great benefit to us in doing family history, but it doesn't mean we can toss common sense out the window. And the great thing is that you don't have to be a genealogical expert to use common sense. Again, we've all got it. It's just a matter of applying it, and a lot of times too, trusting ourselves. I have helped people as a Temple and Family History consultant who have so little faith in their self and so much faith in technology that even if, for example, FamilySearch gives them an incorrect record hint or an incorrect duplicate hint, and they even think it's incorrect, they still don't trust themselves enough, and they go ahead and say, well, it's FamilySearch. They said it was a hint or they said it was a duplicate, so I must be wrong and FamilySearch must be right. Well, technology is not foolproof. So if you come across a point where you question the technology, I would say give yourself some credit and look into it some more and realize that you just might be right and the technology might have got it wrong in that case. Might have got it wrong. Is that the right grammar? Anyway, hopefully yes. Okay, the next thing that we wanted to talk about is the importance of knowing where to find the information and help you need when you don't have the answer yourself. One of the great sources of information is the FamilySearch Wiki. You can get to it by clicking search on the top FamilySearch menu bar and then by choosing Research Wiki. When you get to the wiki, this is the kind of thing you will see, a search page. And just to clarify, if you haven't used the wiki before, the wiki is not a place to find your ancestors' names. So you don't go, oh, I'm looking for my great-grandmother named Sarah Bell. I'll go to the wiki and look for her. No, you're not going to find Sarah Bell by searching the wiki. Rather, the wiki is a place to find records pertaining to the place where your ancestor lived so that you know what records to search. So for example, and it also has information on research strategies, but for example, I was working on one of my Quabbell lines and Stuffins lines that lived in Genesee County in New York. but I didn't know, like I was needing to find some more places to look because I wasn't finding the information that I needed. So I came to the wiki and I searched for Genesee, and as the minute you search for anything, they pop up all these suggestions. And as it happened, the first suggestion was the one I needed, Genesee County, New York genealogy. So I clicked on that, and oh my goodness, I got this huge long page of suggestions for where I could research to find my ancestors who lived in Genesee County. I couldn't even fit the whole page on this screenshot, you guys. I had to clip it out and clip off the bottom. It was a whole huge list of all these places that I could try, places that I probably wouldn't have thought of otherwise. So if you're looking for places to search for your ancestors, definitely check out the wiki. Here are some other places where you can get help. The Family Search community is a wonderful place, and this is a live link, a correct one, thanks to Gordon, who caught an error on this link just before class. So it has now been corrected. If you click this link right here, you will get taken to the Family Search community, which is basically just a place, if you haven't been there before, it's just a place where people ask and answer questions. So if you're stumped, you can ask a question, and if someone else is stumped and you know the answer, you can share your answer with them. Family Search Centers are another great place to get information. There are Family Search Centers all over the world. So you can go to the Family Search site and look up the location of the Family Search Center closest to you. Ward and Stake Temple and Family History consultants can help people. And actually, I'm a stake consultant, and we are not limited to helping people that are just members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We can help anybody who requests help. Of course, subject to time constraints and whatever. But the reason I wanted to bring that up is if you are listening to this and you don't happen to be a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but you know a consultant who is, you can ask them for help. Online classes and webinars are also a way to get information. Hopefully that is being helpful to you in today's class. And the last thing I wanted to mention is to rely on the Spirit. The Spirit is so valuable in doing family history. When we have questions, we can turn to the Lord in prayer, and He can answer our questions through the Spirit, and can give us guidance for places we might need to look or people we might need to talk to. Maybe you'll be confused and you'll get a prompting to visit the Family Search community or visit your Family Search center or whatever it might be, or contact a relative. But I've just found in my life, especially in doing family history, that when we're stumped, one of the best things to do is to turn to the Lord and listen for that inspiration that He will give us. Let's now, with that as a background, talk about the research cycle. Probably a lot of you have seen different versions of the research cycle as you've worked on your family history or gone to other classes. I don't think there's one right version of the research cycle. I think they all have their strengths and possibly weaknesses. So I'm going to share with you my favorite version of the research cycle. At the center of the research cycle are two things, or at the heart of it, you might say, probably won't surprise you. Seek and rely on the Spirit. I've tried to do research without seeking the Spirit's help and with it, and guess which one worked better? It was the one where I sought the Spirit. I made better progress, made fewer mistakes. I love the allegory in Jacob 5 in the Book of Mormon that talks about the laborers going into the vineyard and working with the master of the vineyard. So as we seek direction from the master of the vineyard or the master of family tree, I think that's a fair thing to say, he will give us that guidance, and then it's up to us to follow it. And I love this verse that says that the laborers in the vineyard did obey the commandments of the Lord of the vineyard in all things. So that will be a great help to us in the research cycle. And the other one is one that we've talked about before, but it's such an important principle in family history, and that is to use what you know to discover what you don't know. So last week, I think it was, we went through the example, a very simple example of Lena Mae Beasley using what you know to discover what you don't know. Didn't want to rehash that one again, so we are going to walk through another example that illustrates this principle. So I was working on my Bescabie line, and one of the people that marries into that line is a Sarah Swaby. She actually, well, I won't give you the whole long background. That's a problem with family history. Sometimes we want to share the whole big story about it, but that'll get us sidetracked. So suffice it to say that before Sarah Swaby married my ancestor, she married a guy named Henry Samuel Garnett. At the time that she married him, he was a widower. So the question came to my mind, who did he marry before this time? So for the sake of completeness, and also I was finding some records that seemed to be conflicting. So I thought I've got to do a little bit more research on this and find out who Henry married before he married Sarah. Well, how would I do that? I can use what I know from this record that I know is about my Sarah. I can use that information to do further research. So let's take stock of what we do already know. I've highlighted it in red here. So, and put a little summary down here as well. So we know that the full name of the guy we're looking for is Henry Samuel Garnett. We know he's a rope maker by occupation. We know that his dad is Joseph and that Joseph is also a rope maker. And this is a little bit of common sense that sometimes eludes us. Sometimes we don't think about it. But it is very helpful to stop and say, okay, this is a second marriage. It took place in 1855, 29th of July. So if I'm looking for a previous marriage, I don't just have to do a broad search for any Henry Samuel Garnett getting married. Instead, I know that it had to happen before this date. And it would have had to happen as a starting date when he was old enough to marry. So that helps me narrow down the time frame for looking for this other marriage that I want to find. Well, we do the search, and again, this is not an illustration of actually doing all the research. It's illustrating the principle of using what you know to discover what you don't know. So I found this marriage for a Henry Samuel Garnett. I'd love to get your input in the chat. Do you think this is for our guy? And if so, why? And I hope that is large enough to read, you guys. If it's not, let me know. Okay, Gordon pointed out that the occupation, rope maker, lines up. And rope maker is a pretty unique occupation. It's not like agricultural laborer or miner, of which there were many in many areas. But yeah, to say that it's a rope maker, that's some pretty good evidence that this could be our guy. Anything else that anybody notices? Yes, Jody, thank you. The dad's name matches. If this had said Thomas Garnett, I might have been a little concerned. It still could be the same guy, but could there be two Henry Samuel Garnetts with different dads? Yeah, absolutely there could. So you guys have hit on two of the key things. The rope maker lines up, the dad's name lines up. So let's see, his name lines up. And also the other thing is that the date is reasonable. So it falls within the time frame that we expected. Henry is old enough to be getting married, but the date is not after his second marriage. If it had been, then that would have been another red flag. So looking at this, I feel really comfortable that this is an earlier marriage of my Henry. We used what we knew to discover what we didn't know and make progress on our family history. So those are two central principles as we implement the research cycle. And then we walk through 5 steps. First of all, review what you know and pray for guidance. Then set a goal. And the goal should be simple. Like the goal shouldn't be break through a brick wall. Now, that's a good overarching goal, but little goals that we implement in the research cycle need to be broken down more. So, a good example of a simple goal is just figure out if Beatrice Dolman got married. Then we determine which records could help us meet our goal. The wiki may help there. The fourth step is search the records and evaluate whatever results you get. And then finally, based on what you find out, update Family Tree or your personal database and or both and attach any sources. So that's the cycle. Let's look at it in action. I was working on my Dolman family. I had done pretty careful research on the parents and I'd found the kids, and then I was working through the kids. So here I am looking at Beatrice. So this is step one, review what you already know. So I scroll up the page and I see that Beatrice was born in 1893, or christened at least, so she was probably born very close to this time. And her christening took place in Derby, Derbyshire, which indicates that she was probably born, if not there, then very nearby. So that kind of gives me an idea, a sense of her time and place. So now I'm feeling a little more familiar with her. I remind myself that her parents are Robert and Susanna, and these are her siblings, John, Mary, Winifred, and Carolyn. I'm reviewing what I know. Now, as I look at her record, I see that she doesn't have a spouse, and that gives me an idea for my next goal. I want to find out if she married. So there's my goal. See how easy this is? We're already to step three. So now we want to determine which records will help me meet this goal. Here are the records that are most likely to help me since she lived in England. And during the time period to help find a spouse, these are the records that will help. Church marriage records and government marriage records. And that's pretty much it. Now, you might be saying, okay, that's great, Kathryn, you knew that because you've done English research before, or my consultant friend knows that. But what if I was all by myself and I had no clue that this was where I should look? That's where the wiki comes in. And actually, all of us will find ourselves in this situation where we'll find an ancestor who lives in a place that's not familiar to us, and we're just not sure where to research. The wiki can be very, very helpful with that. So now that I've decided what records I probably want to search, the next step is, where can I find those records? Well, record hints in Family Tree are a great place to look first. It's kind of low-hanging fruit. Then we could look in FamilySearch historical records, which has many records about our ancestors, especially it has a lot of records for the 17, 18, and 1900s. So if you're in that time period in countries where FamilySearch has collections, then going to FamilySearch historical records is a great place to check too. And then there's major sites like Ancestry.com or FindMyPast.com, and specialty sites like FreeReg, which is a free site where volunteers have transcribed English church records, or Online Parish Clerks, which is the same thing. So I know now going forward that I'm most likely to find the information I need in these sources. And I'm going to start with the low-hanging fruit. I'm just going to start with record hints on Family Tree. Now, it isn't always this easy, but in this case, I clicked on the hint and it was for a marriage record. So as I looked at it, it looked reasonable. So the birth year calculates to be about correct. So Beatrice is 21. If you subtract 21 from 14, you get back to her approximate birth year of 1893. So that looks right. It's got the right dad. His name is Robert, and the location matches the family's residence in the census. So far it's looking good. But let's do a little more checking. When possible, I like to match occupations, especially if they're unique occupations. So I opened up the image and found that Robert Dolman is listed as a plater, and that matched the other records that I had for him. So I feel really comfortable that this is a record for my Beatrice, and now we know that her husband is Charles Torr. We know from his age in the marriage record that he was born about 1892. The marriage record doesn't give a birthplace, but given that both of them were living in Derbyshire and that people didn't move around a whole lot in the 1800s or even the early 1900s, we just weren't a very mobile society back then. It's a good guess that that he was born in Derbyshire. And we have something that will help us prove that, which is the full name of his dad, Frederick Albert Torr, and his occupation is filer. So once again, we're going to use what we know to discover what we don't know. I went to Ancestry for this particular search because they have good record collections and their hints are very good, and I think their user interface is very simple to use. So I put in the best information that I had, which was the name of the groom, Charles Torr. Oh, and I should explain, sorry you guys, I realized I didn't explain why am I looking for his birth information. The reason is that in order to do an effective duplicate search in Family Tree, it's almost always needed to have a birth year and a birthplace. Otherwise, the duplicate algorithm may miss the duplicate. So whenever I add somebody to Family Tree, which we're hoping to add Charles as Beatrice's husband, I want to know, if possible, at least an approximate birth date within a year or two and a birthplace. So that's why I'm going to Ancestry here, is to use all the information that I know in order to find what I don't know, which is his exact birthplace. But I have put in my best guess. So I put in his name, the approximate birth year, best guess for birthplace, and the father's full name. And then I click search. And I come up with two 1901 censuses. So here is the 1901 that lists Frederick A. Torr. Sounds like a good match for Frederick Albert, doesn't it? And he is a filer, and he and all his family are born in Derby, Derbyshire, which totally matches the marriage record. The 1911 census down here is the same. Here we don't even have an initial for middle name. We've got the full name, Frederick Albert Torr. He is a filer. He and his whole family are born in Derby, Derbyshire. And here's cute Charlie. They called him Charlie when he was a boy, apparently. And when he was older, he probably asked them to please call him Charles. I'm just guessing, totally guessing on that. But in the census, his dad or mother, whoever wrote this down, recorded him as Charles Torr. And he's born in Derby, Derbyshire. So we now are comfortable that we've got enough accurate information that we can enter Charles as Beatrice's spouse. So we come back to Family Tree, we click Add Spouse, and we enter the information that we know. His name, he's male, he's deceased. He was born about 1892, and we know, thanks to our little, yeah, that probably took me, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes of research. It was nothing horribly time consuming. Just had to find the censuses and read them. So we know our guy was born in Derby, Derbyshire, and we know his dad's name. So I click Next, and look what we got. We got a possible match. Well, is it a good match? 1892, 1893, I'd say that's close enough. Derbyshire, Derby, same thing. Frederick Albert Torr is the dad, but I have to admit, when I looked at this and saw the mom, and I'm not saying that you would have to do this, I said, Esther, ooh, that doesn't sound familiar. I think I'd like to verify that just for my peace of mind to make sure. So I go back to the 1911 and 1901 censuses. Well, there's Esther, there's Esther. So that is his mom's first name, and I can further be comfortable that Esther Bruin is really his mom by finding Charles's birth record, which lists his mother's maiden name. So I did that. Her name was Bruin. And just so that you know, like I didn't navigate away from this screen and say, oh, forget it, cancel. I'm going to have to now go do this other research. No, I left this up. I just opened another browser tab, very quickly went to the census and went to the birth record and said, yep, checks out, checks out. Probably took like a minute or maybe 2 minutes max, where I felt very comfortable that this Charles Torr is my Beatrice's husband and he is the one that I want to add. So I click add match and he appears as Beatrice's husband. So now we are to step 5, which is to update family tree. We did that actually, sorry, adding Charles was part of step 5. And attach any sources. So I attach the low-hanging fruit here, and then I also attach any census sources. If they don't show up here, I search for them in FamilySearch and attach them, and just make sure that everything I've found is well documented. And again, that is not a difficult thing to do because FamilySearch has made it so easy to find those electronic records and to attach them. And even if it's an electronic record from another site, it only takes another few minutes. Or if it's a paper record, you can scan it and attach it. I mean, honestly, when I think back to like the 70s and 80s when we were photocopying things and having to transcribe everything into well, it wasn't even FamilySearch then, it was like a path and whatever. It is so much easier today. We are so blessed that technology has really lifted a huge burden off of us in documenting our people. So anyway, we document our person, and then guess what? We're back to the beginning of the research cycle. So we start with step 1, and we're not going to go through this again, you guys, in case you were worried. Where I just wanted to show that, hey, once you've gone through the cycle and you get back to the beginning, then we review again and we say, okay, what should be our next goal? Well, did they have kids? That seems like a pretty good next goal. So that's an example of walking through the research cycle. So we are to the final part of our webinar today, which is the benefits of using a research log. So what exactly is a research log? If you've never used one and you've just heard people talk about them, but you're not really sure what they're talking about, put very simply, a research log is just a document where you record your family history information, your research information as you find it. Things that you include in a log include what you found, when and where you found it, any contradictions or problems, what you didn't find. So suppose that you searched in a census where you were pretty sure that your family should be there, but you didn't find them. That's worth making a note of. And then finally, here, and this isn't like, these aren't the only things that you can put in a log, but they're common things that you would put in a log. Another thing is what you want to do next. How many of you have ever been doing family history and then you've had to quit to go fix dinner or go to work or whatever, and then you don't get back to what you were doing for maybe a couple of days, and then you come back to it and go, oh dear. What what was I doing? Who was I working on? Where did I stop? What was my next step? I think that's probably happened to all of us. And a very simple way to stop that from happening is when you know you've got to stop your research, take 30 seconds to decide what you want to do next. Like, next time I come back, I'm going to look for Charles and Beatrice's kids. Or next time, I'm going to look for my Bescabee family in the 1850 census. Just even a little phrase can help you next time so that when you come back, you aren't struggling, or worse yet, repeating stuff you've already done. And in fact, that turns out to be one of the benefits of using a research log. It helps you keep track of the information you've found, what you've searched, and what you still need to search so that you avoid repeating the same searches. also your research log can serve as a backup in case information gets incorrectly changed in Family Tree. So all these things are good reasons to use, or good benefits of using a research log. So what does a research log look like? Well, here's kind of a research log that might work for you if you're a paper and pencil handwriting kind of person. So I have friends who just go, nope, I'm not going to use an electronic document. I'm much more comfortable with paper and pencil. If this is you, you can Google and find examples of paper research logs where, like, you've got these columns you filled out. Where are you researching? What are you looking for? What did you find, etc. If you're a kind of person who prefers electronic, there are different types of logs. One of my favorite, as many of you may know, is the timeline grid, which is just a table that you create or copy, and you document one family, parents and children, in one grid. And of course, you can make multiple grids, but I don't put multiple families in a grid. It just gets too messy. The timeline grid is most useful in countries and time periods with regular censuses, and it's just a way of gathering key family information in a compact space. This is a blank grid, but here is a completed grid where you've got a column for each census where you found the family and a row for each person that you found in the family. And again, it's just a very simple way of capturing the research that you do. That's all we're going to say about the timeline grid today, but if you would like more information, here's a link to my website, which has more information. It's totally free. Nothing on my website costs any money, and it never will. On this page, you've got links to videos if you want to watch to learn more about the timeline grid, and also links to templates. So another type of research log, or other types of research logs, you can just do an internet search to find them. There are many, many different types that you can adapt to your needs. So the point isn't that you have to use a certain kind of log. The point is use what works for you, but do use something. You'll be really, really glad that you did. So that brings us to the end of class today. We talked about why research sometimes has a bad reputation, unfortunately, and hopefully we talked about some things that can help change that bad reputation. We reviewed a version of the research cycle and did a demo of it, and then we talked about the importance of using a research log. It really does save your sanity. So we would like to invite you now to share any key takeaways that you have in class. Then here is a link to the class materials for today. So you guys, the link Gordon just put in the chat will take you to this handout. And the way it's organized is just by classes. So today we were on class 4. So there's the link to the slide presentation. There's an activity handout that will help you practice what we talked about today, and also a participant survey. And we'd love to get your feedback on today's class. Oh, Angela, thank you. Angela says, wonderful information. Thank you. And Angela, thank you for joining us because you are the person who joined us from Australia, right? If I remember correctly, I'm scrolling up to see. Yes. So Angela, it's 7:30 to 8:30 a.m. Monday morning for her in Australia. So Angela, we're so glad you joined us, and I'd love to have you come back for any of our other classes that are interesting to you. Any other questions? I'm actually not seeing any questions in either the chat or the Q&A.
There has been one question in the Q&A, and it was about what kind of research should be done for adoptees. And I put into the answer that DNA is definitely your best bet, and that we have a fantastic DNA specialist at BYU Family History Library that serves on Friday. And he is amazing. He's helped a lot of people find who their biological parents are.
Oh, awesome. That I didn't know we had a DNA specialist. Laura, thank you. That's really good to know. Oh, and Sophia asks, can he help online? And so does he do virtual consultations, Laura?
Yes. Yes, if you call
Yes.
in, you go to the new BYU website and get onto virtual help, the person who's sitting at the desk will answer your, will be the person that you first encounter, and they will you'll tell them that you want to speak to the DNA specialist, or you want to say Brother Dunn, because Brother Dunn is his name, and he works only on Fridays.
Okay,
But
that's
he's
good to
he's
know.
fantastic, and he works with a lot of people virtually. In fact, most of them are virtual.
I'm going to go ahead and put the link to the virtual page in the chat. So, Sophia, you can just, whenever you're ready on a Friday, you can click that link, and then you see down here, there's a link that says click here to join the live virtual family history desk. And then, as Laura said, somebody will answer and just say that you want to talk to Brother Dunn.
He's great. He's wonderful, and it's free, totally free.
Yeah, never a charge for our services at the BYU Library Family History Center.